Beneath the Diamond Veil Part 1. Chapter 1, The Interview Invitation. London was still half asleep when Harper Quinn opened the letter that would change everything. The morning light poured through her apartment window in soft gold streaks, glinting against the rim of her half-empty coffee cup and the messy stack of papers on her desk. The city outside hummed faintly, buses sighing, horns distant, drizzle clinging to glass. It was one of those grey London mornings where the air smelled faintly of rain and ambition. The envelope didn't belong there. It wasn't one of the hundreds of press kits or event invites she usually found scattered across her desk. This one was heavy. Luxurious. The kind of envelope that made you sit up straighter before you even touched it. It was black, thick like velvet, sealed with a wax crest she didn't recognize, a single, engraved R surrounded by what looked like vines or thorns. When she lifted it, she noticed how cold it felt, as if it had been kept on ice. Harper frowned. No sender address. Just her name in silver calligraphy. Miss Harper Quinn. She hesitated for only a moment before sliding a letter opener beneath the seal. The wax cracked with a sound that seemed too loud for her tiny kitchen. Inside was a folded card, the paper thick enough to almost gleam. Miss Quinn. Your reputation precedes you. You have been selected for a private interview with Mr. Gabriel Roth, founder and chairman of Roth Diamonds International. The interview will take place at Blackthorn Hall, his family estate, this coming Saturday at 6 p.m. Transportation will be provided. Confidentiality is expected. Attendance will be rewarded. Sincerely. E. Langford, House Secretary, Blackthorn Hall. Her breath caught on the name, Gabriel Roth. Everyone in London knew that name. Billionaire diamond magnate. Silent recluse. A man rumored to have turned grief into empire. His wife had vanished years ago under circumstances that tabloids still whispered about, though no one dared print the full story. He hadn't given an interview in over a decade. And now, he'd chosen her. Harper glanced at the city outside. People hurrying across the crosswalk, umbrellas bobbing in the drizzle. It was the kind of city that taught you not to believe in miracles, only opportunities dressed like them. Still, her fingers trembled slightly as she read the letter again. Attendance will be rewarded. That line alone could pay her rent for 6 months. But more than that, it was the story. The kind that could make her career. She'd built her reputation writing truth about powerful men who hid their rot behind charm and champagne. If Roth was finally opening his doors, she'd find out why, and she wouldn't leave without answers. By late afternoon, her small apartment had turned into a whirlwind of decisions, which dress said serious journalist but still presentable among billionaires. Which heels could survive an English estate without sinking into the grass? She packed her camera, notebook, and a pen that had inked her best stories, and, occasionally, her worst regrets. Her best friend, Maya, called as Harper zipped her bag. Wait, Gabriel Roth. That Gabriel Roth. Maya sounded half concerned, half jealous. The one and only. He doesn't do interviews. He doesn't even do dinner parties. Then maybe he's lonely. Or maybe he's dangerous. Harper laughed, but there was a flicker in her eyes when she hung up, the kind of unease that comes before an adventure that might cost more than it gives. 2 days later, a black Bentley appeared outside her building precisely at noon, gleaming like obsidian. The driver, an older man in immaculate gloves, greeted her with a polite nod and no smile. Blackthorn Hall, Miss Quinn. The ride was long and strangely quiet. The city melted away into endless green fields and winding roads lined with centuries-old oaks. Every mile felt like moving backward through time. When the gates of Blackthorn Hall finally appeared, wrought iron, crowned with the same R crest from the letter, Harper felt a shiver roll down her spine. The estate stretched beyond the trees, more a palace than a home. The sky had turned an almost cinematic grey, the kind that made the stone walls look like silver. The mansion loomed at the end of a circular drive, windows tall and expressionless. She couldn't help but notice that even the gardens were symmetrical, too perfect, like a painting no one had dared to smudge for decades. As she stepped out of the car, her heels clicked against the wet cobblestone. Somewhere far off, a fountain trickled softly, its sound echoing in the silence. At the door stood Mrs. Langford, the house secretary who had signed the letter. She was tall, severe, her grey hair twisted into an elegant chignon, her face unreadable. "Welcome to Blackthorn Hall, Miss Quinn," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes held that faint gleam of pity people wear when they already know how your story ends. Inside, the house was colder than she expected. Every surface glimmered, marble, crystal, portraits gilded in gold, yet the air felt still, almost heavy. Somewhere down the hall, a grandfather clock chimed, and Harper counted the seconds between each toll. "Mr. Roth will see you shortly," Mrs. Langford said. "In the library. Do mind the second corridor, the floor's uneven." Harper's gaze drifted upward as they walked. Every wall was lined with paintings, mostly portraits. Men and women with elegant faces, all staring out as though watching her. And then she stopped. Halfway up the staircase hung a painting of a woman in ivory silk, one gloved hand resting on her chest. Her eyes were pale, almost silver. Her expression gentle, secretive. But what froze Harper in place was the face, her own face. The same features. The same curve of the mouth. Even a faint scar above the right eyebrow, identical to one Harper had gotten years ago after tripping in a subway station. The nameplate beneath the portrait read: Lady Evangeline Roth, 1893. A soft hum rose in Harper's ears, part fear, part disbelief. "That's impossible." Mrs. Langford glanced back at her with the faintest hint of a smile. "Most guests say that, Miss Quinn. You'll find this house has a memory for faces." And with that, she turned, leaving Harper standing beneath the portrait that seemed to breathe with her. In the distance, footsteps echoed, slow, measured, deliberate. A tall shadow stretched along the marble floor before the man himself appeared. Gabriel Roth. He was younger than she expected, early 40s maybe, but there was something old in his presence. Tailored black suit, silver cufflinks, a faint scar at his temple. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone used to being obeyed. Their eyes met. "Miss Quinn," he said, voice low and steady, almost too calm. "I've been expecting you." Harper swallowed, pulse quickening. "I didn't realize billionaires sent handwritten invitations these days." He smiled faintly. "Some things are worth doing the old way." Behind him, the chandelier glimmered, hundreds of diamonds catching light and scattering it across the marble floor like stars. And in that shimmer, Harper felt it, the first pool of something dangerous, glittering, and irresistible. She didn't know it yet, but this was no interview. This was the beginning of a story that would cost her far more than her byline. Chapter 2, Arrival at Blackthorn Hall. Rain fell in thin, perfect threads as Harper Quinn stepped fully into Blackthorn Hall. The door shut behind her with a soft, almost ceremonious click, sealing out the world she understood. Inside, the air carried that faint scent of old wood, lemon polish, and something metallic, as if the house itself breathed through its antiques. She paused, blinking up at the chandelier overhead. It hung so low she could see every cut of its crystals, hundreds of them catching the storm light from the tall windows. The reflections danced across the marble like liquid silver. Each droplet of light looked alive, like something watching her move. "May I take your coat, Miss Quinn?" Mrs. Langford's voice came from somewhere behind her, quiet but firm. Harper slipped the damp trench from her shoulders, trying not to let her nerves show. "It's beautiful here," she said, because that was the polite thing to say. Mrs. Langford gave a small nod, the faintest curve of a smile. "It was built for beauty," she replied. "Though it hasn't much use for it lately." The woman folded the coat over her arm and gestured toward the main corridor. Harper followed, heels clicking softly over the marble. The hallway stretched endlessly ahead, lined with portraits that reached nearly to the ceiling, solemn men in Victorian coats, women with veiled eyes and pearls tight around their throats. Every few steps, Harper caught the strange feeling that someone, or several someones, was watching her. The portraits seemed to lean in just slightly, faces shifting in the dim light. She reminded herself she was being ridiculous. Just nerves. Just a story. They passed under an archway where the floor changed from marble to black and white tile, polished to a mirror's shine. The storm outside rumbled faintly. Somewhere, a grandfather clock ticked with steady precision. "Blackthorn Hall has stood since 1792, Mrs. Langford said, noticing Harper's glance. "It has seen 4 generations of Roths. Each left their mark, some in paint, some in stone, some in silence." Harper smiled faintly. "You've worked here long." "All my life," the woman said. Her tone made it sound less like devotion and more like duty. "My mother before me. Her mother before her." The hallway opened suddenly into a grand staircase that wound upward in 2 perfect spirals. The banister gleamed with varnished mahogany. Candles flickered in wrought iron sconces despite the electric light above, a strange mix of modern and medieval that made Harper's stomach flutter with unease. At the landing, she caught sight of the portrait again, the woman in the ivory gown, the one who looked exactly like her. Now, in the gloom of the afternoon, the resemblance felt even more uncanny. The eyes seemed softer than before, almost pleading. "She's beautiful," Harper said quietly. Mrs. Langford didn't look up. "Lady Evangeline Roth," she replied. "First mistress of Blackthorn Hall." "The first." Harper turned toward her, but the woman had already started climbing the stairs. The guest suite was on the east wing, overlooking the gardens. Harper stepped inside and had to catch her breath. The room was enormous, larger than her entire apartment in London. Velvet drapes pooled on the floor. A canopy bed stood at the center, dressed in ivory silk. A fire already burned in the marble hearth, though she hadn't heard anyone light it. On the dressing table sat a vase of white roses, real, fresh, not a single petal bruised. A folded card leaned against the vase. "Welcome to Blackthorn Hall, Miss Quinn. Dinner at 8. She read it twice, fingertips brushing the heavy paper, then set it down, trying not to imagine the eyes that had written it. Outside her window, the gardens stretched endlessly. Even in the rain, they were immaculate, hedges trimmed to geometric perfection, statues gleaming like ghosts among the fountains. She could see her reflection faintly in the glass, pale face, curious eyes, the faintest tremor at the corner of her mouth. "You're acting like a child," she muttered to herself. "It's just an old house." But the moment she said it, something creaked behind her, a slow, deliberate sound. She turned. The door to the adjoining room was open a crack. She was certain Mrs. Langford had shut it. "Hello." Her voice sounded smaller than she intended. Silence. Harper crossed the room, her pulse thudding. She nudged the door gently. It opened onto a narrow corridor lit only by candle sconces. At the end of it, another door stood, locked, with a brass handle tarnished by age. And yet, she could swear she heard music from the other side. Soft, ghostly, a woman's voice humming an old waltz, drifting faintly through the wood. Harper's hand hovered near the knob. Her journalist's instinct said turn it. Her good sense said don't. She chose good sense, barely. Back in the main room, she sank into the velvet armchair near the fire. The warmth should have comforted her, but her thoughts buzzed too loudly. Why would Gabriel Roth, a man who had refused every major network for years, suddenly invite her? She thought again of the letter, that line, "Attendance will be rewarded." Rewarded for what? Her gaze drifted to the fireplace mantel, where a crystal clock ticked softly. Next to it, another portrait, this time a man. Younger, sharp-featured, eyes dark as jet. Even without an introduction, Harper knew who he was. Gabriel Roth. He was standing in front of the same staircase she had just climbed. The painter had captured him mid-turn, almost smirking, as if aware of the viewer's gaze. The longer she looked, the more she felt that smirk deepen. The clock struck 7. Somewhere far below, a bell chimed softly, once, twice, the signal for dinner. Harper rose, smoothing her dress. She caught her reflection in the mirror, her hair gleaming in the firelight, her expression calm, composed. Exactly how she needed to appear. But behind that calm, curiosity burned bright, that restless, dangerous spark that had always gotten her into trouble. Whatever this place was hiding, she would find it. She stepped into the corridor again, the hush of the house swallowing her footsteps, and followed the faint trail of candlelight toward the staircase. Downstairs, the great hall waited, and somewhere beyond it, Gabriel Roth. Chapter 3, The Billionaire in the Shadows. Dinner was served in a room that could have doubled as a museum. A single chandelier hung above a long mahogany table, the light diffused by crystal teardrops that made the whole space shimmer in amber tones. Each place was set with bone-white china, silver cutlery, and a folded napkin embroidered with the letter R. The air smelled faintly of beeswax, roasted chestnuts, and the faint salt of rain coming in through the slightly open windows. But what Harper noticed most was that the table had been set for two. She hesitated near the doorway. A clock somewhere in the hall struck 8, deep, deliberate, echoing through the marble. Mrs. Langford appeared beside her like a shadow. "Mr. Roth will join you shortly," she said, her tone perfectly polite but carrying that curious note of warning, as though she were saying brace yourself. Harper nodded, took her seat, and tried to ignore the absurd thrum of her pulse. She should be reviewing her questions, about the company, his reclusive habits, his philanthropic foundation. But instead, she found herself studying the room. Every surface gleamed, every painting seemed curated to impress. The Roth family line was displayed here like a parade of ghosts, portraits from century to century, all pale, all watching. The fire at the far end crackled softly. A storm still murmured beyond the windows. Then the air shifted. No footsteps. No grand entrance. Just that subtle change in atmosphere, like static before lightning. Miss Quinn. The voice came from the corner, low and measured, with the smoothness of someone who never needed to raise it. Harper turned, and there he was. Gabriel Roth. He had entered so quietly she hadn't seen him come in. He stood half in shadow, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass of something dark and gleaming. The flickering firelight traced the edges of his face, clean lines, calm expression, eyes that caught light but didn't return it. Up close, he was almost too composed. The kind of composure that comes from absolute control, the kind built over years of commanding boardrooms and burying grief. Mr. Roth, Harper said, standing quickly, extending a hand that he didn't take. He only nodded, setting his glass down with precision. I prefer Gabriel, he said. His gaze didn't waver. You must forgive the theatrics of the invitation. I wanted to be certain the right person accepted. She tried to keep her tone casual. You could have just called my editor. He smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Your editor would have sent a gossip columnist. I wanted a woman who knows how to see what's not written. There was something unnerving in the way he said it, not flattery, not exactly admiration, but knowledge. As though he'd already read everything she'd ever written, and a little more beyond that. I hope I'll be worth your time, she said, sitting again when he gestured for her to. You already are. The words hung there for a moment, soft but charged, like the pause before a match catches flame. Dinner began, though Harper hardly noticed the food. A butler appeared briefly, served them both a delicate consomme, and vanished again like smoke. The storm outside had intensified, the rain pressed against the tall windows like fingers drumming glass. Gabriel ate slowly, thoughtfully. She had the feeling he wasn't used to being observed. Every movement, the turn of his wrist, the tilt of his head, seemed precise, as if each had been rehearsed. So she began, forcing her professional voice into place. After nearly 10 years of silence, you've decided to speak. Why now? He looked up, a spark of amusement flickering. I didn't say I'd decided to speak. I said I'd decided to invite. That's not quite the same thing. Exactly. She couldn't help it, she smiled. I see what they mean about you. And what do they mean, Miss Quinn? That you're impossible to read. He took a sip of wine, eyes never leaving hers. Only if you're looking in the wrong place. The line could have been flirtation or threat, she couldn't tell which, and that uncertainty thrilled her more than it should have. The conversation drifted, from business to art to the weather. He spoke of diamonds the way poets spoke of love, not as stones, but as living things. They remember pressure, he said, turning the ring on his finger absently, a simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the firelight like a drop of frost. Every carat carries history. Harper tilted her head. And guilt. For the first time, something flickered across his face. The faintest tightening of the jaw, a shadow in the eyes. I suppose it depends who mined them, he said quietly. Then, smoothly, you've done your homework. I always do. He leaned back, studying her. Your mother was a journalist too, wasn't she? Investigative. Died when you were, she froze. How do you know that? Research. He smiled again, but it was a different kind of smile now, knowing, maybe even protective. I like to understand the people I let into my house. Harper's fingers tightened on her napkin. Seems you understand quite a lot. Not nearly enough, he said softly. There was an edge of something else beneath the words, not menace exactly, but curiosity that bordered on fascination. A long silence followed. The fire popped. Rain whispered against the glass. Finally, Harper said, "People think you built an empire out of grief." "People like stories," he replied. "They don't like the truth when it's too simple." "And what's your truth?" He looked at her then, really looked, in a way that made her heart beat thud in her ears. "That some things, Miss Quinn, are better left buried." Her pulse jumped. "Like what?" He smiled. "Dinner conversations." When the meal ended, he rose and offered his arm in a gesture too old-fashioned to be real. "Let me show you the library," he said. "It's why you're here, isn't it?" Harper followed him down a hallway lined with mirrors and sconces. In the dim reflection, his silhouette loomed taller than the light allowed, a dark figure framed in gold. The library doors opened with a low groan. Inside, the air was rich with the scent of leather and smoke. Shelves climbed all the way to the ceiling. A fire burned low in the hearth, painting the room in warm tones. "This house has a memory for faces," he said quietly, echoing Mrs. Langford's earlier words. "Sometimes I think it remembers more than it should." She turned toward him, heart still racing. "And what does it remember about you?" He studied her for a long moment, then smiled that same unreadable smile. "Ask me that again when you're ready to hear the answer." He left her there, alone among the shelves, with only the ticking of the clock and the soft hiss of rain against the windows. Harper ran a hand across the spine of a book, The History of British Mining, volume I. Dust clung to her fingertips. Somewhere in the distance, a door shut. She exhaled slowly, not sure whether she was relieved or disappointed that he was gone. In the glass reflection of the library window, she caught a glimpse of herself, pale, thoughtful, and behind her, for just a fraction of a second reflection. A woman's shape, standing near the fire, wearing an ivory gown. When she turned, there was no one there. Chapter 4, The Dinner That Wasn't Meant to Happen. The storm outside had passed by morning, leaving Blackthorn Hall wrapped in a strange, silvery calm. The kind of quiet that feels staged, as though even the wind had been told to hold its breath. Harper woke late. Her room was still shadowed, but she could sense sunlight trembling beyond the curtains. The fire had burned itself down to embers. She sat up slowly, disoriented by the sheer stillness, and noticed something new, a breakfast tray on the table by the window, untouched tea, fresh scones, a folded note. "Mr. Roth requests your company for dinner this evening. The Blue Salon. 7 o'clock. There was no signature, only the same looping handwriting from the welcome card, written in that old-fashioned penmanship that looked more like engraving than ink. Harper frowned. She hadn't expected another dinner. After last night's tense exchange, she'd assumed she'd be escorted back to London, her exclusive interview carefully cancelled. Still, curiosity stirred beneath her ribs. Every instinct said leave while you still can. Every journalist's nerve in her body said not yet. The day passed in a haze of muted luxury. She explored what she could of the house, grand corridors, staircases that curved like question marks, drawing rooms thick with the scent of old perfume and wax. No one stopped her, but the silence felt watchful. At one point she passed the locked door again, the one from the night before. It stood harmlessly in the dim corridor, brass knob dull in the light. No music now. Just stillness. Every woman who enters this house loses herself, Mrs. Langford had said. Harper smiled faintly at the memory. Not me, she whispered under her breath, though her reflection in the polished door handle didn't look so certain. By evening, the rain had returned, gentle this time, steady and rhythmic, a soft percussion against the window panes. Harper changed into the only truly elegant dress she'd brought, black silk, simple but precise, the neckline modest, the sleeves soft against her skin. She left her hair loose, for once. She told herself it was because she didn't care what he thought. When she entered the blue salon, she nearly forgot how to breathe. The room glowed under candlelight. Blue velvet curtains framed tall arched windows. A grand piano gleamed near the corner, polished to a mirror finish. In the center, a small round table had been set, linen white, silver polished, crystal glasses glittering. A fire burned low, its reflection trembling in the marble floor. Gabriel was already there, standing near the fireplace, reading from a leather-bound book. He looked up when she entered. "You came," he said simply. "I was invited." "That doesn't always mean people come." There was the faintest trace of warmth in his voice this time. Not charm, he didn't seem like a man who performed, but genuine surprise. She smiled. "Curiosity's a terrible flaw. Or a dangerous one." They sat. The butler poured wine, something golden that smelled faintly of honey. The first few minutes were formal, polite. Harper asked about his travels, his foundation, his company's recent expansion into sustainable mining. He answered precisely, each sentence shaped as if by habit. And yet, she noticed small things. How his fingers brushed the stem of his glass as he spoke. The slight exhaustion in his eyes when business was mentioned. The ring, that diamond band on his left hand, glinting whenever the fire caught it. He didn't hide it. He didn't explain it. He simply wore it, as if it belonged there still. "You built Roth diamonds from your father's company?" she asked carefully. "Not quite," he said, swirling his glass. "My father's company dealt in luxury. I dealt in survival." Survival. He looked at her then, and the answer came in a quiet, unguarded tone she hadn't heard before. "When you lose someone, survival becomes its own kind of business." The words hit harder than she expected. "You mean your wife?" Harper said gently. A pause. The faintest tremor of something, grief, or maybe irritation, crossed his face. "You've done your research." "It's my job." "I remember," he said, setting down his glass. "You like stories that expose truth." "Be careful with mine. It's sharper than it looks." For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of fire. Harper leaned forward slightly. "You built a fortune out of diamonds. They say each one takes millions of years to form under pressure. Maybe the same could be said for you." He studied her, eyes half lit by the flames. "You think that's what I am? A man made under pressure? I think you're someone who doesn't let cracks show." He laughed softly, one of those low, private laughs that feels like a confession. "Cracks are where the light comes through, Miss Quinn. Without them, there's no brilliance." "Blood and brilliance," she murmured, repeating the phrase she'd once read in an old article about him. "Exactly." His eyes glinted. "You see, diamonds are honest. They don't pretend to be anything else. People are not." Dinner ended, though neither could remember what they'd eaten. The room felt smaller now, the space between them filled with unspoken things, curiosity, caution, the faint electric pull of two people circling the same secret from opposite sides. When Harper reached for her glass, the firelight caught the ring on his hand again. A simple diamond. Perfectly cut. Too perfect. Do you always wear it? She asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer immediately. He looked down at it, thumb brushing the stone. Some things, he said finally, are easier to keep close than to bury. She wanted to ask more, about the wife, the accident, the silence, but something in his expression stopped her. A line she wasn't sure she wanted to cross. Instead, she said softly, "You don't seem like a man who trusts easily." He smiled, but the sadness in his eyes stayed. "That depends who's asking." As the evening faded, the candles burned lower, and the world outside the windows dissolved into rain and darkness. The butler had long since disappeared, leaving only the two of them, the journalist and the billionaire, seated in a room that seemed suspended in time. Finally, Gabriel rose. "You'll find the interview papers in the library tomorrow," he said. "Tonight isn't for questions." "And what's it for?" she asked. He paused by the doorway, his back to her, his reflection caught in the tall window, half shadow, half light. "For remembering," he said quietly. Then he was gone. Harper sat for a long time after that, the echo of his voice tangled with the rain against the glass. The room still smelled faintly of candle wax and oak and the warmth of red wine. She glanced at the empty chair across from her, then at the faint circle his glass had left on the tablecloth. When she finally stood, her eyes fell once more on the ring of his that had caught the firelight. It wasn't the diamond itself that unsettled her. It was the way he'd touched it, not with love, but with guilt. And as she left the blue salon, Harper had the sudden, chilling thought that Gabriel Roth's secrets weren't buried at all. They were still alive, glittering just beneath the surface, waiting for someone foolish enough to dig them out.
Because every broken heart deserves a comeback. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional romance every week. Hit like, drop a comment, and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of romance, redemption, and powerful love. And don't keep the drama to yourself. Share this story with someone who lives for twists just like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best comeback is becoming unforgettable.